Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Nathan from So Forgotten, and you're watching Nothing But Noise. Alright folks, thank you for joining me for the very first episode of Nothing But Noise, the stories of So Forgotten. And we're going to talk about the very first release. It was a 6-song EP, Broken Glass and Mended Hearts. And before we talk about that release, it wouldn't be the embarrassing beginning if I didn't talk about kind of where the inception of So Forgotten came from. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was the frontman for a band called Uneven Ground. And I won't go into all the details, but I found myself in a position where I had been asked to leave the band. All these years later, things have been very amicable. I'm in contact with a good portion of the members of that group and on great terms. They're great guys, and actually being asked to leave the band was the perfect call. Again, I'm not going to go into the reasons, but it was the right decision for the band to make, and it was something that actually really kind of helped me figure out who I am as a person. After leaving Uneven Ground, I had to figure out what am I going to do as a musician. And while I was trying to figure that out, I was couch surfing, so I had lots of time to figure out what I wanted to do. Do I want to try and get into another band, or do I want to try and just do something on my own? All I knew was that after leaving Uneven Ground, I needed to set some musical goals. Do I feel I could put out music on my own? The answer eventually was yes, Nathan, you can totally do that. So that was my very first goal. I knew that no matter what, and within like the next 5 years from when I left Uneven Ground, I knew that I needed to create material, get into a studio, and then record it and then release it to the world. That is where So Forgotten kind of came from. As far as the name So Forgotten, it was just something that popped into my head. It sounded really cool, and there's no deeper meaning than that. I'll be honest with you. It was just, I was lying in bed after I landed in Toronto, and I was just like, okay, what's maybe this, maybe that, and then just Forgotten Soul. No, there's too many bands that have already used that. How we just flip it around, So Forgotten. Yeah, you know what? I kind of like that. It's a bit of a tongue twister to some, but I like it, and I've stuck with it. 2005 is when So Forgotten was officially a music project. And at that point, I had come up with the name, and I had created enough material that I felt that I could go to a studio. So the first studio that I reached out to was the Music Room in Arkona, Ontario, or just outside of Arkona, Ontario. And the studio owner-operator was Glenn Teeple. I had worked with Glenn when I was with Uneven Ground, and we were putting out our full-length Arkona Fairway. Super, super nice guy, tons of experience, very patient, and willing to hear what I wanted to kind of bring to the table. So I go to the Music Room, I'm working with Glenn, and we put out everything for the EP, plus a couple other songs. There was The Prayer, there was Abusive Lifestyles, Sick of You, Beautiful Noise, Song for Carrie Ann, Sour, and Lullaby, Song of Strength. Now, in the very first recording session, Beautiful Noise and Lullaby weren't a part of that. I went in and I did those other tracks, plus another one called Time, and if you ever get your hands on the original recording of Broken Glass and Mended Hearts that was released back in 2006, there is the 6 tracks that I've already mentioned, plus 2 secret tracks. Track 7 was 30-Second Gap, and track 8 was the hidden song Time. I've called this episode The Embarrassing Beginning because that's exactly what it was. I had never worked by myself creating any kind of music, and I was also in a position where I still didn't fully have my voice. I couldn't yell and scream like I could before, and I didn't feel comfortable trying to sing every single song. Again, because my vocal cords were not in a position where I felt that I could productively come up with enough singable material. That left me with relying heavily on my influences around me, which was when you're living in Toronto, surrounded by rap and hip hop, already a fan of 90s rap. But I do not consider myself to be a rapper, but I thought I would give it a shot. It's not a rap album. It's that first recording session was more song talking than anything else. This is a release that I can't really sit down and listen to from start to finish, because there's a couple of songs I'm just kind of like, oh man, wow. I see Broken Glass and Mended Hearts as a learning opportunity. It was my jumping off point. And I knew it wasn't going to be this crazy, amazing release, but I knew that it was also going to help me to meet that goal that I had created for myself. And that was to put out, if not a full length, then an EP within that 5-year window after leaving Uneven Ground. That's what I did. The album was released in 2006, and I had to go back to the studio to record Beautiful Noise and Lullaby, because I had met my now wife for over 15 years, and we were expecting our first child. So Beautiful Noise was dedicated to Carrie-Anne, my wife, and Lullaby, Song of Strength, was dedicated to our not yet born daughter, Michael Autumn. Lullaby ended up being the lead single off of Broken Glass and Mended Hearts. It is my favorite track. It is one of my favorite songs that I have ever created. It's very synth heavy. But I love it. There was it felt like creating it, and the lyrics, and going into the studio to kind of put some vocals behind what I created. All of it felt like it was just meant to be. And I'm so glad that I was able to get, if nothing else, to get Lullaby recorded and out to the public. But Abusive Lifestyles and Sour were two songs that I had first written for Uneven Ground. And they were songs that I wrote. The musical arrangements that were on Arcona Fairway, of course, it was the band, all of us working on it together. But the lyrics were definitely mine. And the same for Sour. I was like, so you know what? I'm going to take that with me, and I'm just going to rework them into something else. The first version of Abusive Lifestyles from the Arcona Fairway release was dedicated to a personal friend who was going through some things, and that, I got to kind of bear witness to what his kind of home life was like at the time. But as we toured and did that song and performed it, we had kids coming up, especially after the drop-in centers that we would play at, and a few of them would be like, that song speaks to me. This is what I've been going through. And I would sit there and I would get these other stories. So I took some of those other stories and then rewrote the song so that it was talking about what I had originally come up with, plus adding in some of the lived experiences from these kids and young people that I was meeting as a performer. Sour was kind of the same thing. I had a few people that would kind of want to talk about that. And it was just a really easy song to come up with. I pieced it all together, and they all ended up on the album. The really, really funny thing, though, is even though Lullaby was the lead single, if you had your hands on the original copy from 2006, there were the 6 songs that were listed, and then there were these 2 secret tracks. Track 7, 30-second gap, and track 8, time. 30-second gap, which is literally 30 seconds of silence. It was just meant to be a filler between the ending of Lullaby and the beginning of Time. But since streaming platforms kind of hit the market, it became the top streaming track off of that entire album. I probably should feel insulted by that, but I think it's absolutely hilarious that a song, not even a song, but a recording where it's literally not my music, not my voice. It is just 30 seconds of pure, unadulterated silence. It's the biggest streaming track off of the entire friggin' EP. That's hilarious. So I just sit back and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll just collect whatever revenue I can off of that, and we'll just kind of take it from there. I re-released Broken Glass and Mended Hearts after it was remastered. But only as 6 tracks, from Prayer all the way to Lullaby. I removed the 2 secret tracks, You can get your hands on either one of those, depending on what streaming site you're on. But I remastered everything, and I just put it right back out there, and with some new artwork. It's still not my favorite EP, but like I said, I hold it close to my heart because So Forgotten would not have started, most likely would not have started at all, if I hadn't gone into the studio working with Glenn and then putting out this EP. So it is, while it's not my favorite, it's still vitally important to the story of this project, to the story of what this project has become, and I still kind of hold it in high regard. For anybody who wants to know, the original cover art was a manipulated photo that was taken from the hallway in the basement of the apartment that I was living in at the time. And the reworked cover art was a photo that I took and just manipulated the living shit out of it so that it came out to this really kind of obscure pink and purple hue format. But beyond that, I mean, no matter what you're listening to, the original recordings, recording engineer and mixing and mastering, that was all Glenn Teeple. It was produced between the two of us. Glenn and myself, I went to Glenn looking for like some insight, like to kind of get some feedback as to what he thought about it. So he was a huge help. And all the lyrical and the musical content, everything was written, composed, and arranged by me. And yeah, that's essentially it. I mean, as far as, any of the dedications are from the original recording, that I'm not going to go through because it was a fairly extensive list. It's just, that is So Forgotten and the embarrassing beginning. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I will see you next week. Many blessings, and blessed be.